So this morning's a little different. If anybody's new, we have a retreat. This is our first non-residential retreat, 4-day retreat going on here. It's sort of in preparation for when Great Cloud is done and we have residential retreats here, people staying, but sort of practicing. So people are on retreat, but in the evening after the final meditation, they're going home, and in the morning early, they're coming. Otherwise, it's a usual retreat schedule. So this is the third day of the retreat. So the Dharma talk will be a little different because I'm really giving the third day Dharma talk to the people who are here on retreat. That is also why we usually don't have poster boards up, and this is because we're on retreat. And just to note, there are members who live outside of the Tampa area who are on live stream right now, and the talk is being recorded. So this retreat, this 4-day retreat, is on a very central topic. It's really the most central topic in Buddhism, which are called the Four Seals. It is said in Buddhism that in any teaching that calls itself Buddhism, that doesn't is not congruent with the Four Seals, is not a teaching of Buddhism. So it was very powerful. And, it was said just a few minutes ago, we bow to the Buddha, the capacity of each of us to be awake. Well, the Four Seals show us how to be awake. So we don't have to wonder about how to do it. Because when we are asleep, we do not know what's going on around us, right? But when we wake up, now we have the full capacity to see where we are and what's going on. Right? That's the difference between being asleep and being awake. And so these teachings on the Four Seals help us wake up out of our waking sleep. Because like sleepwalkers, we often do not see what's really going on. Right? Because the way we see what's going on is through, very imperfect organs. We see through our eyes, we hear, the five senses are what's bringing us information, right? So let's just take the first seal, and we're on the third seal today. So let me just quickly go through the talks from the retreat will probably be posted, but you could find probably lots of talks and books on the Four Seals of Buddhism. And the first three are really called the three marks of existence of Buddhism, so this is widely known. Okay. So the first seal, and again, seal means, it's like the king's seal. It's like the most important, when something was sealed by the king, it is most important, right? It is what all existence, which means life, is sealed with. Okay, so they are to be noted. The first one is all composite phenomena are impermanent. So the Buddha taught this seal, this truth, to counter our mistaken belief that things are permanent. Now, why do we innately think that things are permanent? Because they look permanent, right? You see, even as infants, we come out and we see the world and we see our mommy and our daddy, and they look solid and real, don't they? They look like they'll always be here, right? If you look at us, right now, we all look permanent, don't we? Do you know what I'm saying? In this moment, we all look permanent. Everything looks permanent. Everything that's happening looks permanent. Everything we're doing looks permanent. But that may not be true, you see, right? So we have this innate belief in the permanence of things because we're getting data only from our five senses, that are very limited in their capacity to understand. And then our thinking mind is interpreting, right, what they're seeing. And so we are then generating lots of endless misperceptions of what's going on in reality, right? Like, see, I look solid, don't I? Right? Do I look solid to you and permanent? But yet, you know, everybody knows that I am what? I am in the process of dying, right? I am in the process of aging, right? It's going on all the time, right? I am in process. I am in motion, right? And and that is obvious. And everything, the Buddha said, is in motion. Everything's impermanent because the word composite phenomena implies that all phenomena are created by causes and conditions and are subject to the law of cause and effect. So everything's in motion because everything is created by causes and conditions, and they're always changing, right? And that's the macro view. Now, Buddhists also understand, and now science confirms, that you see, your eyes not only cannot see that I'm in process of dying, process of deteriorating, it's called aging, you know, but our eyes, we don't have x-ray vision. You can't see inside me, can you? So you can't see that inside me, there are endless processes going on that are all in motion, right? And that we know that even within all those organs and tissues and cells, there's a molecular level, right? There's an energetic level. None of it can be seen. And that's going on in everything, right? I mean, I won't belabor it because again, you can reflect on it. But the Buddha taught that impermanence is the most noticeable thing about what's going on in reality. And when we believe that things are permanent, we will what? We will suffer because we will endlessly attach, thinking that I have some permanence, I have some solidity, this is going to stay, whether it's our body, a relationship, the climate, whatever. And yet it is all subject to causes and conditions, everything. This building is. Okay? So this is the first truth. Okay? That all composite, all phenomena that is composed of is created by causes and conditions. Now, the second uh, uh, seal, which we did yesterday, and again, when I say we did, there was a talk, but then all day long and all night long, the participants reflected, meditated on these to see if they're real. See, because the Buddha's teaching is not theology. It's not revelation. The Buddha looked deeply at reality. That is why there are many things, like I just said, about impermanence that now science would go, oh yeah, that's right. You see, but this was known to the great meditators of the past. They discovered it themselves. Right now, the second mark is that all contaminated things are unsatisfactory. Okay, and another word for contaminated is stained or defiled, conditioned, mundane. So what this one means is that, and this is a little tricky, and the Buddha taught this one the same way he taught impermanence to counteract this fundamental belief in permanence. The Buddha taught the second noble truth because because we perceive things as the objects and we perceive that they will bring us happiness, but all they will bring us is unhappiness or dissatisfaction. So he taught this truth so we could see clearly. Is that clear? It's not clear. Good. Well, I said we spent the whole day, so I don't. Uh, So this is more, it means that things that are contaminated are things that are not seen clearly. Okay? They are stained. They are stained by attachment. They're stained by delusion. So they're stained by a false idea of permanence. They're stained. Now, the biggest stain in Buddhism is the stain of duality, which means we perceive that, everything out there is out there, and I'm in here, right? See, I'm in here, you're out there. And so therefore my relationship to everything is, it's not, it's external to me. It's an object, right? And I'm an object, right? And my whole relationship to the world is, how can I get the objects I want, and how can I get rid of all the objects I don't want? Does that sound familiar? That's life. The Buddha called that life. The problem is, again, because of impermanence, remember impermanence? It doesn't work. It's fundamentally unsatisfactory. Right? This was not a moral judgment. This was not like, oh, life is just one endless pain. No, there's pain and joy. Right? There's pleasure and pain. There's gain and loss. But the problem is they exist together. Right? The problem with a life devoted to endlessly having pleasurable experiences is what? All pleasurable experiences are what? Impermanent. Uh-oh, I got a problem. I endlessly devote myself to seeking pleasure, but it's only temporary. I constantly have to go at it again. And the other problem is what? That what begins at pleasure over time as I keep going gets sort of neutral. And then when it ends, I don't feel good. See, there's a little bit of discomfort. I'm uncomfortable, right? So I have to do what? Get it again. So this is just life. You see, this is the life we live in. It's the world of desire. Again, we gain, but when we gain, we're afraid we're going to lose it, right? And we lose it, we want to get it back. And see, the Buddha called this all suffering. He said this is fundamentally an unsatisfactory way to live. It doesn't produce an ongoing, consistent state of well-being, happiness, and ease. Is that clear? It's not like, there are definitely things in life that are suffering. The suffering of pain, the suffering of loss, right? All kinds of very, famine and war. And, there are real sufferings in this human realm. But the Buddha really looked at these kind of way we go about living our life because of our misperceptions that are fundamentally causing us always to be in a state fundamentally of dissatisfaction. Right? No matter how good things are, there's always this sense there's got to be something else, or like on to the next. And this endless, which is kind of normal in our society, we think that's normal. The Buddha called that suffering. And fundamentally, he said the third kind of suffering, he said, is this fundamental suffering that we experience ourselves as a separate self. That fundamentally we experience ourselves as separate from, alone from, not connected to all life in existence. And that is a deep, deep suffering that said that only enlightened people see because they have that connection. So most of us don't even know it, but we feel it because we just sort of feel, even though things could be good, we get surrounded by people, there is this sense of aloneness, right? You know what I'm saying? It's very deep. Anyhow, so that's all I'm going to say. We've been going on, and so that's what we were meditating on yesterday and this morning. The third, and Angie's just, and this is again very unusual. Again, this is one of the unusual things about Buddhism, and this is a little harder to see. Again, these first two, again, we can get conceptually, if we kind of turn things around, we go, oh, I get it. Yeah, everything is impermanent. Yeah, macro, micro, yeah, everything isn't. You know what I'm saying? We can kind of get that. Yeah, my belief in permanence is false, and we can kind of look at things philosophically and go, yeah, I can see it. Yeah, I can see why this whole world just doesn't bring satisfaction and happiness and peace, and why I'm always every day a little agitated. Even if things are good, I'm always having to get something, do something, want something, need something. Okay? Now, the third one is all phenomena lack self-existence. Or another translation is all phenomena are empty and devoid of self. All phenomena are without any inherent existence. And then that's what we're going to talk about this morning. Thank you. So the fourth mark of or the fourth seal, fourth Dharma seal, which we won't be talking about today, is nirvana. All that is the fourth seal of all life. Cessation of suffering and, eternal peace, we might say. All existence has that capability. It is through the first three, if we practice and understand and realize the first three, we will naturally get the fourth. Because these three teachings are fundamental, and they are studied in Buddhism, they are deeply reflected on and contemplated so we can transform the way we view things, as well as in the meditations, they can be realized, especially this last one. This can be realized. Now, I was thinking about it earlier. I was thinking, forgive my hubris, but it seemed like this should be second. You see, because if you kind of, if you, if it wasn't for that, we think all phenomena, composite phenomena, are permanent, and if we didn't think that all phenomena have a self or self-existent, right, we wouldn't grasp at things, and if we didn't grasp at things, we wouldn't suffer, right? So it's interesting. So, but anyhow, that's my own 2 cents. But anyhow, all three of them go together. So, in terms of these teachings on non-self or no self, again, it's not apparent, you see, because in the same way that I said we sort of have this innate experience, even from infancy, in terms of our senses, that the world seems permanent. See, that's like time, right? Right? Permanence relates to time. But also, the world appears solid, right? Doesn't it? And not only does the world appear solid, but I think I'm solid, right? Like I'm a thing. Is that true? And so, even from childhood, we have this innate sense of me, right? Which is, in a conventional sense, true, right? I mean, this is my body, right? I'm kind of responsible for taking care of this body. I'm not responsible for taking care of all the other bodies, right? I have, I mean, when I get sick, I get sick. Not everyone else gets sick. Uh, when I have, when I want to have an education, I'm talking about something for me. When I want this or I want that right? So there is this, does everybody know we have this sense of me, right? And all the things, my body, my thought, my past, they all belong to me. Is that true? Right. So we all have that innate sense. And we also have that innate sense about everyone else and everything else, that everything is a solid thing, right? But the Buddha said that is not true. That is not true. That it may appear that way. The same way our bodies appear permanent, the same way our bodies appear solid. But again, through technology and through introspection, traditionally it was done through introspection, but through technology, we can see what? That there's nothing solid about this body. Is there? It's just made up of parts, right? And if you took out and separated out all the parts, you wouldn't find anything called a body, would you? And you wouldn't find anything called a Fred, would you? Even though it appears that way. So this fundamental insight into this fundamental misperception is one of the great realizations of the Buddha. That which appears to be a self intrinsically does not exist in any permanent real way. Right? Like we talk about what? We talk about our past, right? Does everybody know we talk about our past? And we talk about our past like, this is what happened, this is what I was up to when I was 5, and this is what I was up to when I was 7, and this is what I was up to when I was 11, and this is what I was up to when I was 15, and then I was up to the, you see, it's like, and how old you are, you can just keep going. But there is this sense, right, that there's some continuous self who is participating in all of that, right? Who is participating in the whole thing? Me, right? So therefore, this is my story. And yet, is that true? Is the whatever you conceive of your I or self sitting here right now, is that the same I and self that went to kindergarten? How are you connected to that? I mean, just look behind you. Is there a thread? Some kind of thread connecting you to, kindergarten? Who you were when you were 5? Who you were when you were 7 or 15? We talk like this is my past. But what is my connection to that, to those events? Other than what? Other than memory. Memories are just what? Images, pictures. They're not real, are they? They have no solidity, do they? See, it's interesting how we maintain the fiction of self. No, it doesn't mean that we don't have memories. Right? And there may be people who remember us when we were 5, can validate that somebody with that name who lived at this address, who had these parents. You see? The Buddha never denied kind of this conventional way, the way things look. He just said, if you look more deeply, you will see There's nothing solid or permanent there. It's very profound because it's not only here, it's in everything, right? So close your eyes a second. And I want you to pick somebody, imagine somebody, bring somebody to mind who you're really angry at, right? Even better if you hate them. All right? Okay? Just kind of, everybody keep their eyes closed, but sort of, yeah, like somebody you just are really angry at. Can be past, present, or future. Okay? And better if you hate them. So it's really strong. Just raise your hand so I can just see that you kind of have that person. But obviously, it wasn't very hard for most people. All right. Okay. Now, what I'd like you to do is, in your imagination, uh, just remove their eyes. Okay. And when you remove your eyes, do you still hate them? Look at them. Do you still hate them? If you still hate them, remove their ears. Remove their arms. Remove their legs. Look at them. Do you still hate them? Look at them. Do you still hate? Do you still hate them? This is important. What is it you hate? Remove all their organs. Now what do you hate? Keep dissecting them until you see there's really was never any solid thing there. We created, just the same way we did in ourself, we created not only a solid self for me, a solid permanent self for me, but a solid and permanent self for them, and we have carried it with us. Some of us might be hating people from years ago, right? Some of us might be hating people from very recent. This can be disorienting. I understand. But this is very important that we see this because so many of our actions in this life, our attachments, our aversions, are based on perceiving solidity and selfhood in everything. Right? Everything is just made of parts. In the physical world, the mental world, you know. Most of us, we think we have a mind. Does everybody here think they have a mind? This is not a trick question. All right, everybody think they have a mind. Okay. But what is a mind? Just look. Look to your mind. I mean, everybody has a mind, right? We announce that. Everybody raise their hand. Okay, everybody has a mind. Look to your mind. Is it a thing? Do you see a thing when you look to your mind? It's interesting. We talk this way. And in a conventional sense, yeah, we have a mind, but then when we look to go, well, where's this thing? See, a thing is something that has characteristics, that has some kind of way to be defined. But is there a permanent thing called your mind? So look into your mind, and what do you see? I mean, what is it that you call your mind? This is not a trick question. What? You see thoughts. Very good. And do you see there's been one continuous thought since birth? Just look into your mind. Is there anything solid, permanent in your mind? What do you see when you look into your mind? What? Nothing. But there's all these thoughts and feelings and memories just coming and going, coming and going, coming and going. That's impermanence. But even the mind itself is not a solid thing, right? So in the same way, if we take the hated person that we hate because we hate them as a person, because we think they're a solid thing. Now, I am not, because I can see where some people are going, I'm not saying that things don't happen in this life which are terrible, right? But I'm talking about this belief that we and them are solid things and that they exist and we exist in this solid way. There's great liberation in this. There's great freedom in this. So, in the same way, when we see the enemy and we begin to dissect them, eventually there's nothing left to hate, is there, physically? Did you see that? There's nothing left to hate. They're just parts. Uh-oh, I'm in trouble now. Can you see? I'm in trouble. Well, I know what I'll do. I'll hate their mind, right? Okay. So now do the autopsy on their mind. Take it all apart, scatter it about, and what do you have? Thoughts, feelings, perceptions, endless. But you can't find any solid thing there either. I'll take questions at the end. Yeah, this is important because can you see what our mind is doing already? It's doing what? It's rejecting or resisting. It's good when we listen, just listen. You know what I mean? Just kind of take it, and then at the end, yeah, this is not dogma. This is not, yeah, I want you to. This is challenging stuff. I'm not denying that, okay? But just first take it in, listen to it, because it does. You're absolutely right. It goes counter to the way we live and the way the world lives, right? We live in a world where hate is very normal, isn't it? Anger is very normal. Holding on to angers and hatreds is normal, right? That's true. So, so again, everything is just made up of parts, and these parts come into existence because of causes and conditions, right? We call this a building, don't we? We call this a meditation hall, don't we? We give it a name, and we look at it, and it appears what? Solid. And we give it a name, meditation hall. But we know that, this building wasn't here decades ago, right? And we know that it just gets kind of walls and ceilings and floors and windows. That's all it is, right? And it is impermanent and subject to change. And if we sold it to an evangelical church, you'd come here on Sunday and there'd be something else going on, and there'd be a different title out there, right? Isn't that true? So just because we name something doesn't mean it's real or self-existence, right? So I'm named Fred, and I have a conventional, I'm here. It's not like I'm not here, but I'm not permanent and I'm not solid, and I'm just here temporarily, just like all of us. Just like all of us, just like everyone in this world. But because we do not recognize this, acknowledge it, and live from that truth, endlessly misperceive, and in our misperceptions, our attachments, our grasping, our wanting, our needing, our hating, our loving, we endlessly cause suffering for ourselves and for others. So the Buddha taught these let's say these first three as a way to wake us up, right? And to show us there is another way. And when we might call this is the view of Buddhism. This is how the Buddha viewed phenomena, view the world, right? You see, those are the eyes, right? The eyes see, right? When the eyes see clearly, it can walk unhindered. Right? Without the eyes, we'll just be stumbling about, right? Even though we can walk, without the eyes, we're blind and we just stumble about. But when we have eyes, which means we have the correct view, we have the clear seeing, then as we walk this life, walk this path, we can do it effortlessly, right? We can do it seamlessly. We can see what's really going on. But if we live in the world where everything is permanent, everything is solid, and to attach to it, I can find happiness, is to set us up for suffering. And the Buddha said, I teach only one thing, the end of suffering, the cessation of suffering. That's what he's here for. This is not a kind of a philosophical academic presentation, right? To take home and compare. Now, how does this compare to Hinduism and Christianity, Judaism, Islam? You see what I'm saying? That could be interesting, you see. But, the Buddha himself, when you read his teachings, people would try to engage him in those kind of conversations. And if you've ever been to India, you know India is a great place for metaphysics. They love metaphysical stuff. Buddha wouldn't do it. He said, I only teach one thing, the cessation of suffering. And he taught that great analogy of the philosopher's out in the woods, with a hunting party, and by mistake, he gets, he's a philosopher, right? He thinks deeply about things. He gets shot with the arrow. People know this story. It's a great, anybody not know it? All right. So the Buddha gets shot. Not the Buddha. So this philosopher gets shot by an arrow, right? But it's not a fatal shot, right? Let's say it's in his belly, okay? But it's serious, right? So he's on the ground. The arrow's in his belly. And, all of a sudden, one of the hunters, somebody realizes he's got an arrow in him, and he comes running up and sort of bends down to pull out the arrow. And the philosopher goes, stop. First, tell me, what kind of wood is the arrow made of? And the guy says, I don't know, ash or something. Stop. The feather on the arrow, what kind of bird did it come from? So he tells him what bird, and he says, stop. The person who shot it, how old were they? Where did they come from? And, were they a good shot? Or, you know what I'm saying? And the Buddha, it goes on and on. The Buddha says, this is, if there's an arrow in you, the urgency is to what? Pull it out, okay? After you pull it out, you can ask these kind of questions. Is that clear? You see, so we whatever your path is, it's like just practice the path to get the arrow out. Whatever your arrow is in, whatever you think that arrow is in you, get enough teaching, get enough practice so you can pull it out. Okay? And after that, you can engage in all kinds of philosophical discussions about the arrow. Yeah, so, I mean, there's so much that can be said. A lot of this has to do with the organs of perception and the mind interprets. So, the mind is endlessly based on the misinformation that are coming in through the senses. So we can't see. See, we can't, we were talking about impermanence, and a couple of days ago, I was saying to people, we can't see. This wall looks solid to us. But to a scientist, is this wall solid? They would say, what? What? No, it's what? What? Yeah, it's porous, but also at the molecular level, at the right, it's all in motion, right? Tiny little things. There's no solidity there. It looks, we don't have, remember Superman? Those who remember Superman from the 50s? Yeah, he had X-ray vision. That was like, what a superpower. Right? He had X-ray vision. He could, he could see what we couldn't see. He could see, he could see. He had X-ray vision. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we had X-ray vision? But we don't have X-ray vision, so we depend on our senses, which are superficial. Right? All we can see is the outside of other beings. We can't see their mind. We can't see their thoughts. We can't see their feelings. We can't see the cause and conditions that have created them, can we? All we see is, right, the way they are right now. We have very limited vision. And then, you see, so all we see what's in front of us, and we think that's really who they are, but then immediately our mind thinks it knows who they are. Anybody ever do that? You see? As soon as we see someone or a thing or an object, we immediately project thoughts on them. Is that true? Well, where are these? I mean, how real are these thoughts? And how accurate are these thoughts? Well, they're all based on our history, which is based fundamentally on misperception. We don't see clearly, do we? So it's this endless spiral of misinformation, right? Is that clear? The organs that we're using to connect with the world are very faulty. They really see very narrowly. They misinterpret. Things look solid and permanent to them. We have this mind, right, that endlessly thinks that things are outside themselves. So it's always grasping, wanting, needing, right? Liking, disliking. It thinks it's self rather than a kind of insubstantial convention. We think our self is real, a real, solid, permanent thing. It certainly looks that way. But as I said earlier, if you take the body apart and if you take the mind apart, you cannot find whoever you think you are. Let's just try doing that. Okay? Begin with thinking who you are, you know. So if it was me, I would say, I am Fred, right? And this is Fred's body, and this is Fred's mind, and this is Fred's past, and this is Fred's future, right? There's someone in charge of all this, and his name is Fred. Now, please, you use your own name, okay? or it could get confusing. All right, I don't, we have enough problems already without thinking we're somebody else, which of course is really what we do. But okay, so you begin with this strong sense of I, me, mine with your name. Right? This is me. This is mine. This is who I am. Okay, this is my body. This is my life. This is my car. This is my home. This is my job. This is my reputation. My, I, nice and strong. And it's all tied in with your name that you identify And we have all kinds of identity. We have age identities, and we have gender identities, and we have sexual orientation identities, and we have racial identities. I mean, it's like in this world, if it's possible to subdivide identities, we seem to have a knack for it, for separating. Now, if I am real, solid, permanent thing, continuous over time, that the that the whoever you are, the I who drove me to, who wanted to come to Sangha today, that drove me to Sangha, that walked in the hall, that's been meditating, that's hearing this talk, it has to, if it's a thing, if it's a real thing, it has to be located. It has to have location, it has to have identity, it has to have characteristics, if it's real. So please first begin to look into your body and see if you can find this person that's always there. Again, he or she's always got to be there, because we think, the I that's here now is the I that was at home this morning, was the I that drove me here, was the I that went to kindergarten, was the me who went to, fourth grade, is the me who goes to work. Right? It certainly appears that way, doesn't it? I'm not denying how it appears, but just look first in your body. Can you find yourself, this self, this me, whatever your name is? Can you find it in your body? Just look through your whole body. Take a quick scan. I mean, this is not complicated. It's sort of like, again, like if you did a physical autopsy on all the parts, subparts of yourself, could you find that part that is me? Is there a part called me? Like if I did it, I would find, there's a little Fred. Right? Did the autopsy, it was somewhere between where? Maybe the heart and the liver. There he was. In his little control tower, central control room. Right? So everybody, please, just do him again. I mean, meditators do this stuff for years, so we're just doing it quickly, just to give you a sense of the practice. Okay. Could anybody find their self in their body? No? Did anybody, or how about I'll ask it, did anybody find their self in their body, like a little self? Right? Misty, you didn't find like a little Misty in there somewhere? No? Okay. Cece, you didn't find, no? Couldn't find anything. Okay. Anybody in the back? Anybody find? Anybody on live stream? Just check. Anybody on live stream? See, they're not in the hall, so if we think we're under some kind of hypnotic influence here, just want to make sure that people are sitting in the comfort of their own home, or might not even be in Florida, are also okay. So, what are we? We are body and mind. Would you agree? Right? So, if we have a real self that's self-existent over time, that's permanent, and we can't find it in the body, well, the obvious place to look is where? Forgive me for kind of being simplistic, right? It's okay. So now, please, look into your mind. And again, see if you can find a solid, self-existent thing called you in your mind. Look everywhere. I mean, we have thoughts, we have perceptions, we have memories, I mean, all kinds of things. We have consciousness, all kinds of things are going on in the mind. But can you find the one thing that is the me? That is I, that is myself. Please just introspect into your, this is simple. know we were given a name at birth. And people call this body-mind of ours by a name. And everywhere we went and did throughout our life, it was always under the same name. I understand. But upon investigation, examination, does that name, relate to a solid, permanent thing called a self or an ego? I don't know. Just look and see. Come, this is your own journey, your own search. And again, it's fundamental. We talk often about selflessness, being less selfish, less self-centered. But the self and the I, me, mine permeates everything we do. It is our stance in life. And wouldn't it be something if it really wasn't true? That I was not this solid, permanent thing called Fred. Can you see so many of the barriers, the walls would come down? The freedom and openness that just comes from no longer identifying. I don't know. So, again, people meditate on this for years. Anybody find them a permanent self in their mind? Nobody did? Really? Don't be shy. I mean, did anybody find a permanent self? Their me, their I, me, mine. Other than the word I, me, mine. I mean, we'll find that one in our mind all the time. It's one of our favorite words, right? Every sentence we do begins with I, or me, or mine. So I understand that it is a thought. The I thought, the me thought. But what does the thought refer to? So if I'm here talking about the cup, and you didn't see a cup, you'd say to me, what? Fred, what are you talking about? Now, if I couldn't show this to you, you'd say what? He's deluded. He keeps talking about a cup, but there's really no cup there. Can you see? It's like, what was that movie? Harvey, remember? Oh, Harvey. It's like, right? Harvey, whatever his name was, he saw Harvey. Remember that was it a rabbit? We're probably dating ourselves by these movies. But it's funny how they say, I don't think I've seen that movie in 50 years. But anyhow, Harvey, right? And to the guy, it was like he was, there was Harvey, his best friend, and he talked to him, It's like children with their imaginary friend, right? Right? But nobody, Harvey wasn't real, was it? Even though he was real to the guy, there was nothing really there, was it? So for us to go around saying, I have a solid permanent self, that's me. But when somebody says, well, show it to me, or at least point me where it is, and you look and you can't find it, what does that tell you? We're not perceiving reality. And you know what that's called in mental health terms? In mental health terms, that's called a delusion. You see? And if we were walking around with a delusory mind state, thinking we were, thinking I was Frank Sinatra or something, somebody would say, I think he needs to go to see a professional because, but you see, we carry around this delusion that we're a permanent self, continuous over time, the same, and yet it cannot be shown, it cannot be proven upon investigation. So let's talk about this for a few minutes. We have a few minutes. So these are the three, the Buddha called these the three seals, right? You know, that as opposed to sort of the diluted way of viewing life that sees things as permanent and solid and has the potential for permanent, or a continuous happiness. The Buddha said, no, everything is impermanent, nothing is solid, everything is made of parts, subject to cause and effect, and therefore it will never produce any kind of stable, ongoing sense of happiness or well-being. It cannot. And it's not because we haven't tried. So for those who've been trying, and not succeeding, don't take it personally. It doesn't work. You'll never get it. Right? So when you understand that, then you have the capacity of freeing yourself from this delusion and then following a way of life that does produce nirvana, right? A continuous state of well-being and happiness that is not predicated on the endless grasping at things, external things and internal things, right? I mean, how real are thoughts? Are thoughts solid, permanent things? I mean, we certainly act like they are, don't we? Think about it. Think about it. Think about it. I mean, don't we act as if our thoughts are solid, real, permanent things? Come on, admit it. We do. And we build our whole life around our thoughts. But just look at what is a thought? Is a thought a solid, permanent thing? No. It's endless. They're impermanent. They are without a self, meaning they have no permanence or solidity too. Everything is like that. Big, macro, micro, the physical world, the mental world. So for those of you who kind of stumbled in here today, so this is what this retreat is the people who are on retreat here have been meditating, hearing the teachings and meditating throughout the day on these three so far. And tomorrow they'll get to the grand finale of nirvana. So any questions? Yes. Oh, it's for the live stream. So people can hear the questions. I get a lot of complaining. People can't hear the questions on live stream. Yes.
So I'm not intending to speak like a philosopher. I'm just very awed that the Buddha understood this at a time way before quantum physics.
Yeah.
And I'm getting the sense of non-self. I'm curious about what is unique about each of us, and if this group were scientists, um, would one of us say, is DNA code? Is DNA something close to a self that's not solid but unique in some way?
Yeah. So again, since we're not being philosophical, I'll agree with you and not really get into it. But I think the important thing to understand for me, because it's very interesting, like you say, that these days it's like the more science advances, the more it confirms these ancient views. So it's kind of interesting. I mean, actually, the Buddha talked about these particles of matter, he called them dust, that everything is made of, right? I mean, how did they know that? Yeah. So again, the problem with scientific insight is it's not liberative. Right? So scientists have these same insights primarily through their using their instruments, right? And so they see these things, but it doesn't produce transformation. You see, this produces transformation because it's about us. You see, and you can read a scientific treatise about quarks and all that. So I'm going, oh, that's very interesting. Well, that's what the Buddha talked about. But we need to experience it, And in Buddhist meditation, as it goes deeper, we actually experience the empty nature of our mind and self, and actually experience and live from a place of non-self that's not a concept, but that's a reality. So, that's the difference. But you're right. It's kind of very interesting these days. Right. Other, yes.
This question is if time allows, but you were talking
This question
about
is what? I'm sorry.
if time allows.
Okay, we have a few minutes.
You were talking about that imagination of that person,
Yeah.
and we were erasing the physical characteristics of the person. And what popped into my mind was it wasn't any of the physical characteristics of that person that I hated.
Yes.
It was the impact of that person's actions on other people. So I was wondering if you could just comment to that.
Yeah. So that's as Gandhi said, hate the, what do you say? Sin, not the sinner, or something like. But it's sort of like that. Martin Luther King, they all, sort of said the same thing. Thich Nhat Hanh says the same thing. So yeah. So the problem is we get lost in our anger or hatred toward the person. And what this exercise does, it sort of shows us there really is not a solid person there. All there ever was just what we said. Okay. And yet, there's action. And action has effect. It's like, for those of you familiar with our 5 remembrances, I'm of the nature to get sick, I'm of the nature to grow old, I'm nature to die. The only thing I can stand on are my actions, right, of body, speech, and mind. And so it is because of that, right? So, we can say there's no inherent self from the big view. There's no inherent self, there's no inherent mind, and yet there is action and there is reaction. And that is true. So we can, your point is well taken. So that's why in Buddhism, Buddhists say there is this absolute view of really like the deeper thing of how things are, but that doesn't offset conventional reality, which we also have to be very, well, you could go, gee, I get it. Everything's impermanent. Nothing lasts second to second. There's no self here, there's no self there. Right? Well, this is great. I can do whatever I want. You know what I'm saying? You see, it can get unbalanced if it just takes the big view, the absolute view. Is that clear? Yeah. So Buddha said, no, they're both. Like in the Heart Sutra, form is emptiness, emptiness is form. They work together. Yeah. So we have to be incredibly impeccable in our actions of body, speech, and mind. Because yes, they do. That's how we are endlessly creating ourselves, through our actions of body, speech, and mind. But also that's how we're impacting others. And like you say, actions, create effects, and those effects ripple. But from a personal point of view, if we believe in permanence, right, and if we believe in a solid self, we might perceive that somehow what happened still exists. and we endlessly relive it as it happened. But all the truth we can say is the effects of that's all that exists now. And I can learn to take care of and heal and transform. But I can't do anything about that primary event, can I? No. And yet we often hold on to that, don't we? And that just causes suffering. So, this teaching, while it's profound, I think it has very important implications for how we deal with who we are and how things show up in the world and other people. Right? It's very optimistic because it means, everybody can change because nothing is solid. Right? Even the worst people can change. Right? Because nothing is solid. The mind isn't solid. The person isn't solid. So there's great potential for the world. There's great potential for everyone. In Buddhism, we say everyone has a potential to be a Buddha. I mean, that's pretty wild. Right? But if we don't get this, you know what I'm saying? We'll stay stuck. We won't see the inherent freedom that we all have. Thank you. Yeah, so that's a very important question. Because again, you see, it's got to be in balance, We can have the absolute, but that doesn't deny the immediacy of the relative, Right, we still have to pay the rent, You say, well, it's all impermanent, and this house really isn't solid. It won't be here in 100 years, and the landlord doesn't really exist, and I don't really exist, right? Can you say like, yes. Don't go to that extreme. So in Buddhism, they say, yeah, you can have the absolute view, but you also have to respect the conventional. Because we live also in the conventional world, where actions have effects, positive and negative, wholesome and unwholesome. Yeah, that's another Dharma talk. So thank you. So again, the difference about today, for those of you who are new, is there will be no announcements. I think things are posted, and of course you just go to the website, find out what's going on, and there'll be no tea. Sorry, we like to socialize with each other, but today there'll be no tea because the retreatants will be having their lunch downstairs. So, and again, for those of you who are not on retreat, please leave in silence. It doesn't mean you can't talk when you get outside, okay? Retreatants are going to stay in. So thank you, everyone.